Hi fam, it's Dylan's mum Deborah. This is Dyl Friends.
It gives you a back rub and says, you know, you're going well, Brian. Oh, it's special.
Get comfortable, be uncomfortable. Just keep showing up and find a way.
Cam was so nervous he couldn't swallow water.
Handed him a sheet of paper with 6 names and said, Chief, we've got to cut these 6 blokes.
Wow, shut up. I've just been barbed by a stingray, mate.
I'm just yelling, well, you saved my life, you saved my life, you saved my life. Thank you, thank you.
I spent the last, I think it was a couple of weeks in jail. The deepest, darkest moments often bring about our biggest highs.
Hodge, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I've been watching for a long time and didn't have an invite. So I'm
I
glad
know
I finally could work into your busy schedule.
I'm going to cue you here. Who have you been watching? What episodes?
There was it, you don't know Buckley? I skipped over a couple of them. You had a few, it wasn't Buckley, there was a few parts that you'd put in.
Kane Corns.
No, I saw Kane, but I skipped Kane. I work with Kane on a Monday, on a Saturday.
You don't want to hear him all the time.
Nah, so I was wondering when I was going to get the
No, you've
invite.
it's been incredible to have you on. Obviously, I have been a big fan of you for a long time, but I have this weird thing. I don't want to annoy people. I want to make sure it's fitting in with them and what you're doing. So I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are.
I've got 4 kids up in Brisbane, so anytime you ask me to come down early, I'll be more than happy to jump
lovely.
into it, mate.
Mate, how's the feud with Tom Brown going at the moment? How you guys? I haven't seen much this year.
No, that the funny thing is people, because you're on TV with people a lot, BT's another one, Tom Brown, people sort of say, oh, yeah, you had a go at him. If we sat there and agreed with everything they said, you'd be sitting there going, shit, this is just boring. So people always say that, oh, you've got to riff with BT, you have a go. I get along with BT fine.
Yeah.
The only thing is sometimes he says stuff, and when you're commentating for a whole game of football, you've got to spark things up because some games of footy are pretty boring.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's a few times where I'm sitting there, I disagree, I'll just go back at him. But then you get off the game and you look at your phone and people are like, holy shit, these two are having a crack at each other. But I've got no issues with Tommy Brown. I've got no issues with BT. But I think to spark up a little bit of entertainment, you've got to have a bit of a dig at something you disagree with, but there's nothing personal. It's just more taking the piss a little bit.
It's my highlight of watching it, to be honest. It does, it breaks you out of that sort of just aeroplane mode of just watching the game. Yeah. It's crazy though with media. I was actually thinking about it this morning, even with those little bits and pieces. Like you see what's happening with Kane at the moment and this commenting of players, and it's just gone fucking mad. Sometimes leaving the game now, I suppose it's hard because you're in the media, and you're in it every day and you're always thinking about it. But taking a step back, I'm going to get a bit weird with you in a minute. I stayed at Crown.
I'd expect nothing less.
Yeah. I stayed at Crown on the weekend. And
are you trying to get another plug for a free?
I would actually
love
another.
Free nights?
I'd love another plug.
There you go, Crown. Make sure you throw it out. He wants to go back.
I really enjoyed it, but I was up high, and
penthouse.
No, not the penthouse. But I was looking down, and when you just look down from a building, and you just get this amazing perspective on life. You see people just walking around and cars going by, and it's the best way. People say be present. I actually have found for me now, not just being at Crown, but getting up high has been incredible perspective. And the reason I bring that up is before that, I was listening back to Kingy and Corns going at each other and stuff.
Yep.
How crazy is it in media? How we're just so everyone's in. And then you take this perspective back and you go, what the fuck is everyone even talking about?
Yeah. Oh, mate, I couldn't agree more. That moving to Brisbane was a big eye-opener for me. When you go into especially being at Hawthorn through the successful years, you move up there and you're a step back from everything, and all of a sudden people that bitch and moan about so much, you sit back and go, is it that important anymore? But what you have to understand is in the media, and the people out there going, these two going back and forth, in the media, there's so many media out there. So if you're going to be just the same stock standard, boring media personality, you won't last long. So Kane's obviously made his name. He's jumped into the media spotlight by making some big comments. I mean, a lot of things he has said has been true or has an element of truth to it. There's been a few things there that you sort of sit back and go, come on, mate, this is a bit far-fetched. But look, that's the way he is. He's a bloody hard worker. If you look at the reason why he succeeded in AFL was because of how hard he worked. If you look at the two brothers, would you prefer to be a physique of Chad or the physique of Kane? Both have their positives. Kane's probably a bit more of an athletic, but he got to where he did because he was a hard worker. And in the media, it's the same thing. He will go through and do so much. That's why he picks up on so much stuff that a lot of people don't, because not that other people don't work hard, but he just goes through so much more. It's like you'd know certain footballers who would do the same thing. Some blokes just naturally have the ability to go and play the game and do a little bit of research. Some blokes will research the opposition to the nth, to the inch of knowing the ins and outs of it. That's what he does with the media. So he picks up on a lot of trends that other people don't. But he also does say a few things. You sit back and go, Kane, shut up.
I love it. I seriously do. I think that like he's been a massive trailblazer in the media, and you look at what they do in the US and how they talk. He's brought that mindset really to Australian sport. And even the fact now, you sit down and you watch a lot of commentary and media and stuff, and it is so easy to say like, you've been a 4-time premiership player, Norm Smith Medallist, one of the best captains of all time. And I sit back just from being involved in footy, and it shits me to fucking death when we throw out like these little things about commentators will say going, oh, they didn't rock up, they weren't ready to win today. It's like, are you fucking, what is that? What does that even mean? And like it doesn't actually get explained. Like there's different things, like did they not rock up to win or did the team just come better to play? Yeah. And that's where I feel like yourself and Kane and other they're actually starting to dissect it and bring more actual professional analytics into the commentary, because that shit, everyone rocks up to win. Yep. That's just such a throwaway comment.
And with football, sometimes they've got a plan against you. So you refer back to the gather round, the Adelaide versus Carlton, and Adelaide blew Carlton out of the park when a lot of people thought Carlton should win. They outplayed them, they outhunted them, but they had a good setup for them. They had Dawson that was going to go to Cripps, and they just had a few plans or a few tactics that actually worked effectively, and all of a sudden, it's like if some team jumps out of the blocks at you, you're hesitant for a little bit, you're on the back foot. And then there's some nights that things don't go your way. So, no, I do agree that when you see they're not trying.
Yeah,
everyone's
they're
trying.
Mate. And that's the best part, isn't it? Like they would have looked at Carlton after that game and said they didn't try hard enough. Give respect to Adelaide. They actually just really played it well, and they did the right stuff. So
and some of them there, sometimes when you're not going well, you try too hard. And sometimes when you try too hard, shit goes the other way.
Yeah.
And as I said, sometimes that your tactics just aren't as good as the opposition, and they beat you to it, or the ball bounces your way.
So answer me this question then, okay? This might be a hard one for you, but thinking about back when you guys were winning 4 flags in a row, 3 in a row, and you won obviously in 2008 as well, who do you think is working harder, right? Yourselves at that time of winning those flags, or North Melbourne over the last 3 years?
Both teams are working harder, but both teams are working at different areas.
Yeah.
So North Melbourne or whoever was down the bottom of those years, North Melbourne were actually up in 15.
Yeah, so whoever was down the bottom.
Whoever's down the bottom, say Carlton.
Yep.
But
Okay.
the only thing is they're like, so the team's down the bottom, and it was the same as when Hawthorn went through 04, 05, 06. When you're down the bottom, you're working on a system, you're working on as hard as you can to either set standards, you're working on a game style, you're working on introducing young blokes into your team to help them feel comfortable. So no matter where you are on the ladder, teams are working hard. Where we were during 13, 14, 15, we'd got the stability of the list. We're adding blokes in to help improve our list. Frawley, Sean Burgoyne, Gibson, Hale, Lake, as much as Lake. He actually reckons he's the reason we won 3 flags. Well, we lost 12.
Yeah.
He was there for 3 years. We won 3 years. Then in 16, we finished top 4 and went out in straight sets. So it was all down to Lakey, if you ask him.
Well, you can't deny that.
No.
Yeah.
He's got a good point. But what we were doing was we were adding people in, but we were working on making sure that we stayed ahead of the game just by different tweaks of the game style. But we're also making sure that blokes didn't get ahead of himself. And as leaders, it felt at times that you were a Grinch because you'd come in on a weekend and things that you probably allow that he didn't square up this time. We were making sure that, hey, don't let that slip into our game. We were able to be successful because we were very anal on those little things. Don't let this be a part of it. So after a while, you get to the end of it. And I captained for 6 years. And after that, I'm like, I've got to give it up because mentally you felt like every time something would happen, if you didn't say it, you'd make sure one of the leaders or the leaders didn't bring it up, you'd try and make the emerging leaders raise it. So it was a stressful time to make sure that the things that we were good at, we didn't let slip. The standards continue to rise, even though that we had a few successful years.
That's a really that was a probably loaded question as well, and I was really interested in your point. I knew that would probably be the answer, but it's funny when you everyone's been around a sporting club or even a good business. Like sport and business are exactly the same. And when things are going well, you often forget those little bits and pieces. And I know that for a fact, the reason I asked that question before was when I was at Carlton, it was crazy. We had to be there at 7 a.m. you didn't leave till 6. You had to weigh in at this time. And if you weren't weighed in, we're going down to St Kilda Beach and doing this. We had to head this amount of Ks every day. And it was fucking like army, you know, like it was so hard and you'd go out and you'd lose every week.
Yeah.
And then I went to the Giants, and this is when they're in their good period, and guys are playing cricket in the warm-up, and, you know, you don't have to weigh in. Like Jeremy Cameron's fucking, like we're doing the warm-up, and he's just shooting basketballs inside and all these bits. And I was like, what is this? What do you mean? Like, you're winning every week. These guys are losing.
Yeah.
But then you look now, and it's like, maybe at that club, because they weren't doing those little things while they're going well, the sustained success isn't going well. So is that the big part of it?
Yeah, well, Clarko's first year, I remember we went down to the beach for a beach session because someone wore the wrong socks.
Yeah.
Because a small little thing of discipline was, yes, making sure you rocked up on time, but making sure that you're dressed in the right attire. You got sponsors who pay big money to be on your chest when you're training, so we made sure that during training sessions, everyone had to be in the right attire. Someone wore the wrong socks, so we went down to the beach. If anyone was 5 minutes late, we'd go down the beach the next time. And it wasn't, I remember it was Zach Dawson. So I think he wore the wrong attire. We went down there. Zach Dawson slept in.
Yeah.
And Clarko and Vanders at the time didn't spray Zach because it wasn't about, he's a young kid learning his way. It was about making sure everyone was going to be disciplined. So they're the small little things that you got to set the standards with the lowest part of it and build from there. But then as you have success, or as the group are getting older, you need to start to trust the guys and say, hey, we trust that you're going to do the right recovery. We used to always, on an interstate trip early on, have to wake up and meet downstairs at 9 o'clock after breakfast and go for a team walk, team jog, bit of a handball, just to get blokes in the right routine before a game. After about 5 years, we made it optional. 20 blokes still would go and do it. There'd be the odd couple that would sleep in still and not want to do it. But it was about setting standards, setting trends for him to continue to do by himself, and then trusting that when they were away from everyone else, away from the eyes of the footy club, that they were doing the right things then. And that's where you can start to trust. And that's why at GWS, when they were playing cricket and playing basketball, the coaches trusted that when it came time to train or play, they'd be switched on enough to do it.
It actually takes me back to a time with Bolt, who, you know, you would have worked a lot with at Hawks. We're on a pre-season trip, and I laughed about it at the time, but since I've left, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, fuck, this was actually incredible. What they did was, we were sitting in I think we're up in the Gold Coast, and we're sitting in a team meeting, and we're like, where the hell are the coaches? Like, this is strange. They come in and they're all in suits. And I was like,
geez,
because you know, there's some weird shit, right? Okay, and I get there's some weird quirkiness about it, but I like the message of it. And the message was like, you know, we hadn't been playing very well when we travelled. It's like, boys, this is a fucking business trip. And it was a bit weird because they're in suits, like at night. But I was like, it stuck in my mind about, okay, we're actually here. This is like a work trip. It's not like we're here to fucking have fun, play table tennis, go and have a swim down at the beach and all those bits and pieces. It's like, this is a work trip. You're going to come in to do it. Which, again, the quirkiness is there, but it stayed in my memory because of that.
Yeah, I've got two for you. And as I said, Clarkson and Bolts are a lot alike. They spent a lot of time together. But we had a trip to Sydney, and it was very similar. 2010 or 11, I think it was. We hadn't beaten one up in Sydney for years. And as we had the final team meeting, we had 10 minutes to go and text or call family, whoever were getting tickets, saying, we're going to have our phone taken off us till after the game. Which, you know, it's like when you go there, these things sit with everyone. Like, you always got it in your hand. So then the blokes went out there and messaged and called people and sort of said, well, we're going to leave the tickets here. You won't be able to contact us. If something urgent, call Mark Evans and you can go from there. Sammy Mitchell had twins, so he wasn't a big fan. He ended up getting his phone back because his missus was very close to giving birth at that stage. But it was the same thing. Every time that you picked up your phone to call, to text, to play a game, you had to think about why you're here. And it was good. What's your role? What did you have to do? So it was the similar thing to a business trip. So it actually worked. We ended up beating Sydney that day. Another one was up in Sydney. It was the year Bud left. It was round 8, 2014, the first time we played Bud up in Sydney. And I was injured, Mitch was injured, and Sully was injured. It was the first time Clarko had coached without the three of us since 2005. Wow. So it's a fair stint with the three of us actually being in the team.
Big leader,
and we're all waiting in there. And I went up there as an injured travelling player. And we're sort of waiting around. Once again, the coach wasn't here. What the fuck's going on? Next thing, the door opens. And it's ironic at the time with the coronation with King Charles. Clarko walks out dressed in the security with the big hat and the red outfit walks in there.
Like the King's...
the security.
The King's Guard.
King's Guard. And he's out there and he's like sitting down there and he had the straight face and we're sitting down there going, what the fuck's going on here? And his whole thing was it's a changing the guard. We're sitting there going, what the fuck's going on? And the best part was I was sitting beside Bruffy. Bruffy's taking a photo of Clarko in the King's Guard. Changed, but that was his mindset, was the same as yours. Like for the whole time he was coaching there, he'd had either Mitch as a leader, Sully as a leader, or myself as a leader. Buddy had gone, so I was up to Ruffy and Louie and all these guys to
That's unbelievable.
Mate, but it didn't work. We lost. but it sticks out in your mind thinking, fuck, how hard would it be for a coach, and especially a coach who's coached for 15, 16, 20 years as Clarko has, to continue to come up with different ideas to try and motivate your boys. Some of them work and some of them you sit back and go, fuck, you're way off there.
But isn't it incredible the fact that like you still talk about them now?
Yeah.
And they have stuck in, because there's been a million things that have been spoken about that I've totally forgot about. But I can recite so many of those little like analogies that, and I'm worried that if we keep going, they'll be crossing over and maybe ruining that, you know, they've stolen off someone else.
We had Clarko did one, and it was one that we thought he was taking the piss. So I think it was of ice skaters. It was about being in sync with your teammates and making sure you're on the same page. With football, with 18 people, you need to know what you're doing and you need to know what he's doing. So you had these two ice skaters in sync, and it was amazing what they did. And you had this really soft music behind it. And we're sitting there going, this is day before a game, trying to motivate 24 blokes that are 18 to 30. It's not working. No. So in the back row, there was myself, Guerra, Stratton, Gibson, Franklin. We've sort of sent the message of when this finishes, let's give it a standing ovation. So as it finished, this piss poor thing, like to motivate blokes, the soft song's finished, and we've just erupted. Yeah, woo, yeah. And then he's looked and gone, you guys can go and get fucked. And we thought he was joking until Lauren spoke to Karen on the weekend afterwards and explained that he spent that much time looking through the tape, getting the music that sort of, because of the mindset behind it, but then it fell flat on his, but he's walked out, slammed the door, and we didn't see him for the rest of it until the game, but didn't realise he was actually genuinely pissed off at our reaction that we're taking the piss out of him because he went to so much time and effort.
My God.
Some of them work and some of them fall flat on their face.
Look, I suppose you could, there's so many, and we could literally talk about it all day, which I'm actually happy to. But the one that does stand out that I've heard, and I'd love just your point of view from this one, was when Clarko chinned himself. Does that stand out fond to your memory? Was it after a loss to Port Adelaide?
It was
Xavier Ellis is one of his favourite stories of all time, but I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, there's a mix between when he punched the whiteboard and dislocated a knuckle. He kicked drink bottles on the ground thinking they were empty. They were full, broke his toe. But I think the one you're talking to was when what coaches do well and what Clarko does well is if he feels that if the players played poorly and didn't have the right attitude and they lost, then he would have a go at the players. But if he felt that attitude was there but the tactics weren't, he'd blame himself. And he was doing that. It's my fault. I feel like, and then he's whacked himself in the head and then did the old stumble back. And the only thing is, being under him for so long, you think that's just normal. Yeah. This bloke, between the changing of the guard and between punching yourself in the face, hitting the whiteboard, kicking the drink bottles, and some of the really good speeches, you're prepared for anything. And they were one of the ones where once he did it, you thought, fuck, he realised he stuffed up then because he's a little bit shaky. His eyes went a little bit glassy. But yeah, no, that's one of many which you can probably mention about Clarko.
Does anything stand out to you around, like, in all seriousness, into September, premiership days, grand final days? Obviously, the games are won. They're there. In terms of coaching and like not even just Clarko, but guys that you worked with in your psychologist, mindset coaches. Like I know Anthony Clarko was there for a bit as well. Who came across the Carlton, and I really enjoyed a little bit of his stuff. Was there anything there that stands out for certain premierships that actually really work for you guys or yourself personally?
I've got a mate who came in with us in the 2014, and he thought pump up music. It was my 250th game, so he thought he'd come in with us, drive in. I think he tried to sneak him in the car so he didn't have to show his ticket because he didn't have one. But he was a bit of a surprise because everyone has different routines. Yeah. And he thought I would have an Eye of the Tiger or something big pumping up. I had 2 kids at that stage. So we'll listen to the Wiggles driving into the 2014 grand final. I remember afterwards he goes, I can't believe that you pump yourself up with the fucking Wiggles song.
I know.
It's amazing when you have kids. A lot of things change, and a lot of your focus goes away from what other people are doing on grand final day. So there's probably blokes like Ruffy who can remember everything, But when you sort of get into those, you focus on what you've got to do for the team. A lot of it, a lot of the build up and preparation, you do midweek, and then going into the game, you sort of go to your own, I guess, in your own mindset until it gets near game time when you start to look around to sort of see what blokes are panicking, what blokes are not acting normal. That's when you go to sort of reach out to them and start to talk to them, because you try and jump into their preparation too early, you might upset them. They might do things different. But you just got to make sure just before the game. So as far as things that jump out, nothing really sits in my
Well, you
mind.
won the board in, like, did you need that? Or it sounds like hearing what you said then, you were sort of pretty just content yourself with your own thoughts and worrying about other people. Is that?
Yeah, it changes. I think you have to adapt with it's as we spoke about before. You need to adapt with you on the bottom of the ladder, middle or high. When I was prior to kids, I was very adamant of what I wanted to do, whether I had to pass the 2 nights before the game. But when I had kids, I realised that you don't get a preference.
Mate, I have a young son, and I don't, like, even this morning booking this chat in, I'm like, I don't know what time I'll be able to see you, mate, to be honest. Like, I don't, like, it's hard to make plans ever. Like, I don't know how.
Try having 4.
Well, to be honest, I don't know how that's going to ever happen.
I remember when
even getting to training and shit. Like, I had 2 weeks off. And I remember, like, you blokes, when you're playing footy, you're back like the next day.
We had
crazy.
It was. I think that's one.
Didn't even think about it.
But that was one thing is, it's an understanding and a build up of being prepared prior to what happening with football. Is you knew and well, your partners are amazing what they go through, but obviously being a partner of a professional athlete who has to go and train to make sure they can prepare for the next week, they go above and beyond.
Yeah.
But that was just the mindset of that's what you did. The times where you used to have love and 8 hours sleep, you realise that prior to a game that was irrelevant. As long as you had a decent sleep in the week leading up, not before the game, it would be handy. But if you didn't have to stress on it, because your motivation, your energy levels, and your adrenaline get you through on 1 or 2 nights bad sleep. It's more when a week or so preparation.
It's all there. You. And again, this is like just bringing back old memories. But last one on this, maybe, is I remember when Bolts first got to, and the reason I keep bringing these up is because I think a lot of this would have come from Hawthorn, or maybe, is we sat in a meeting, and I hope I can articulate this properly, but he said that what he wanted us, it was like the first day, and we'd never even spoke about premierships, and you can laugh about it now because it hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
What do you want from me? Is that what he's going to say?
No,
shit.
No, it wasn't that.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's that. But he said this thing where he wanted us to start visualising that at every game, it's a end of the year grand final. It's hailing. We're like all feeling sick. We're a point down at every turn, a quarter time, half time, 3/4 time. We're a point down, and at the end of the game, we win the grand final. And he wanted to imagine that from now on, that's the way we envision it, so that no matter what happens, if we don't sleep, if blokes are injured, if anything, the worst day possible happens, that you'll be prepared for the worst possible situation.
Prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
But it was cool because in our time, you think about it because, for me, I look at like when you play grand finals and I go, fuck, I want to be Luke Hodge. I want to kick left foot snaps on a beautiful summer's day at the end of the year, but very, very rarely it's like that.
Yeah. Well, that was the mindset, and you're right. What he was preparing the group for was, doesn't matter what the situation, you might have injuries. If you prepare mentally for the worst, so going into big games, I used to prepare having the biggest, sluggiest game as far as it was contested possession. There was no open ball. It was all just hard fight for every possession you could get. So then when you got into games, if that was the game, then you'd be prepared for it. And this is what I pictured was going to be. And then all of a sudden, it's not as bad as we thought. So hang on, I've got the ball. I've got a bit more time and energy than what I had that I was picturing. So if you prepare for the worst or prepare for the most fiercest game that you're ever going to come up against, and it's not as bad, then you sit there and go, well, hang on, I've got a bit more time and space. A bit more time and space. But on the flip side, if you're sitting out there going into a game thinking I'm going to have 30 and kick 3, but all of a sudden it's a final, it's a grand final, it's congested, and you're getting tackled left, right, and centre.
It's hard to go the other way.
It's hard to change your mindset and go, shit, hang on, I need to prepare for this. That's why you see teams. We spoke about it a bit earlier. If you're in good form, that's what you see. If you've got a team that's in a good form, coming up against a team who's had a hard-fought loss or a disappointing loss, you're almost looking at that team to perform better because they've had this build-up of this is going to be shit, this is going to be tough, this is going to be hard against a team going, shit, we're going all right at the moment. We're going, you look at Carlton when they played West Coast, won by 106 points. Then they come and play against the top 4 team who was just wanted to fight tooth and nail. You could sort of see the mindset between the both of them. So it's a good mindset that you try to build into the players, because it's hard to go the other way, as you said.
Looking at Luke Hodge now, obviously very polished commentator, leader, doing what he did. Was it always like that? Young boy from Colac coming in to Hawks?
No.
And what changed? Was there a moment?
No, I think it was maturity. I think when you go through, I got drafted at 17.
That's crazy.
People
don't realise that these days. I don't like the young guys don't realise that guys could. So your birthday was in the first 4 months.
Yeah, I'm June 15.
What,
so
June?
I think the cutoff was June 1st.
I thought it was like April or something.
No, so I think we just snuck in back then.
Yeah.
So I didn't have my licence until I'd played about 10 games of AFL football into my first year. So I had Rick Ladson was the same. Daniel Elstone, we got drafted together. Went and lived in a house. So Daniel Elstone was our taxi for the first 9 months of my playing career. But I came in as a raw bloke. So if you look at the blokes, and I try to explain what it was like back then, it's a lot better now. Blokes in Melbourne who went to private schools, if you compare Bawley, Juddy, myself, they had teammates that would come back and blokes that had been drafted in and around them that would teach them from 16, 17, 18 of the rights and wrongs, what you eat before a game, what you drink before a game, how to recover, how to prepare the best. I was playing senior footy at 15, and I would have a beer after the game and have a piece of pizza, because that's what the senior guys did. Having that build up to when you got drafted, it took me a long time to change. And especially when my career didn't start off as well as what Juddy's did, and then all the articles were about, oh shit, Hawthorn made the wrong call, they picked up the wrong person. My natural self-defence part was, fuck, staying in Melbourne, I'm going to go back to Colac. So my habit was I'd go back to Colac, where it didn't matter if I had 5 kicks, if I had 20 kicks. I was going back and spending time with mates that didn't care if I played football or not. If I had my time again, I probably wouldn't have spent as much time down there, because they weren't being professional athletes or didn't have that mindset. They were having beers, they were eating Maccas, doing all that stuff. So if you had your time again, I'd spend a bit more time in Melbourne. But that was the first few years of my footy career, playing inconsistent football, because I probably didn't listen as much as I should have to the dietitians and the senior players, and would at every opportunity would opt to go back home to spend time with mates, because ultimately you don't know what you're missing out on. In my mind, I'm sitting there going, I'm missing out on 18th, I'm missing out on 21st, and as a young kid, that's all you want to do. But on the flip side, you talk to them later on in life, and they're like, all we want to do was have the opportunity that you did, and I kept going back there trying to ruin my opportunity that I had in Melbourne. So hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think that's what took me a long time to learn. It was just listening to the right people, and then spending more time around the right group, and as far as football guys and blokes that lived like a professional athlete.
2023 now, rejig that draft for me if you think it would have changed now. In modern day, knowing what recruiters know, you said before about private school versus you playing eating pies. Do you think it would have changed?
No, I think it's different now, because how good AFL has been and what they've been able to do to grassroots football downstairs is you have dietitian lessons from 15, from 16. So by the time you look at the blokes who are coming in now, you got kids that
definitely. So modern day, for sure. But I'm talking now, knowing what you knew, if it was the same back then on those 3 guys, do you think that they would have opted to look at a guy that's gone, Chris Judd, who's this ultimate professional?
I reckon you'd probably go back to Graham Pollock.
Really? So he would have gone.
So you're
big
looking,
boy too.
So back then, but even before the draft, I know they spoke about Judd, Ball, myself, about being the top 3, but that was only because Fremantle pushed off the number 1 pick. Fremantle always had Graham Pollock as their number 1. Centre half forward or centre half back was just huge. He was dominant in our era, in our final year. But because they traded off, they got in their centre half forward, they got in their centre half back in Crowder and McFarlane. The 3 that they had above them, which was now Hawthorn, St Kilda, and West Coast, wanted midfielders, because they were stocked with top end talent, of the spine bookends. So they actually got what they wanted. They got bookends, plus Graham Pollock was probably the best draft pick there. So I reckon if they went through and did the draft now, with knowing how important the bookends are, they probably would have went Graham Pollock.
Wow. How do you think when you were mentioning before about going back with Colac.
Mind you, there was Gary Ablett Jr. who's
he's a pretty good player as well. Yeah,
he's probably going to sneak in there somewhere.
That's so
as well.
crazy that he went. Like, I know there was a father-son, but was he rated that highly then, or did he? He really came on like when he got drafted.
He came on about 206,
I
think, because he was. Gaz, I played primary school. Primary school with
you
Gaz.
Played cricket with him as well?
No. I played cricket with
Bawley.
and Jimmy Bartell. But I first met him in primary school with the Vic primary school staff.
Yeah, there's that famous photo of you guys.
And there was Nick Geeshan was in as well. Troy and Adam Selwood. Who else? There was Cameron Cloak was in there.
Unbelievable.
There was a few.
Those
guys
schoolboys photos now, like you can still see them, like the ones of Oliver and Petrarca. Yep. It's just like a common thread of everything there.
But that's Gaz when he went through. I think he got to stage. He always had that freak ability.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until he sort of matured a similar thing, and I think he put in a solid preseason after 206 when a few of the senior guys said you could take this competition if you get fit. And that's what he did. And I think he won the Brownlow the next year. How
do you think you would have gone now, looking at guys like in the young? And I know this stuff gets absolutely beeped with the media, but it's really interesting the point that you made about Judd dominating. Because again, I was probably a little bit younger, wasn't really aware of it at that stage. How do you think you would have gone with the media now that is so scrutinised on young players about performing? Look at Jason Horne-Francis and every number one pick that comes through.
Yeah.
How would that have bothered you, do you think?
I think there's no doubt. I think as much as people say, we don't read the paper, we don't listen to it, the AFL revolves around media, whether it's the social media stuff, whether it's paper, whether it's TV. The players revolve around comments that are made, and whenever you have, you know, it's like if you have a good game,
I'm checking Twitter. I'm checking.
Yeah, but then the next time, if you have a bad game, what's your habit?
I delete the app.
but a lot of kids still, a habit is to go back. I want to see what did anyone say anything bad?
100%.
And that's this is where the hardest thing for young blokes to understand is football is such a big roller coaster. You're on such a big high after a big game. You're such a low after a shit game. But to try and block out the advice from people external, from the people on Twitter, either way, to try and stay at that balance, that's how you be consistent. And that's how, as far as your mindset, not to be as up or down, which makes your body language, which makes your attitude, which makes your mental state, which makes your performance. And that's the hardest thing to try and tell these young guys, to try and eliminate it.
It's like that equilibrium piece. And again, it might be another Hawthorn anecdote that I'm picking up slowly. All this stuff is being stolen. But yeah,
we stole it off someone else as well.
Don't get too high, don't get too low. It was a big thing for me as a young bloke that I struggled with a lot, was when you play a good game, you're the best bloke, you're the best boyfriend, you're the best son, and you're a good friend, and then you play a bad game, you're like, I'm the fucking worst bloke in the world, and you'd think you're a bad person. And
it's funny, but your attitude reflects how you played, which shouldn't have anything to do with it, because in 7 days' time, you got a chance to play again. So why don't you change your mindset and go from, fuck, what about how I played? Good or bad, how can I focus to be the best player next week or throughout the training track or improve for that next week? And it's no different to... It's funny, moving out of football, you'd think, well, I remember I was doing commentary. I think it was my last year at Hawthorn, and I was doing special comments, and I was just starting to prepare. But this is before I even thought of going to Brisbane. Started to prepare to work for Channel 7, so I was doing some special comments. And halfway through a game, I just checked Twitter, and someone had a red-hot go at what I was saying, whether I said something about their team. I can't remember the actual thing, but all of a sudden, I looked at it, and then I just stopped and didn't want to comment, and then hesitated. And I remember I was with Luke Darcy, and I sort of, and he picked up on something, and I sort of said, he goes, mate, never look at anything like that when you're commentating. So even now, when I'm finished commentating, because sometimes you say some things, sometimes you make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Of course. That's how you improve. You make errors and you learn from them. But whether I commentate now, I won't look. I'll go to Twitter and I'll just scroll through any feed that's come to me, and then just look at any football stories or anything like that, because I've learnt that I felt more comfortable playing football than I do commentating. But even now, you're still in the roller coaster of if you perform well, if you perform not so well, but then the feedback from the public isn't going to help you either way.
It's always there. Do you know what's actually quite hard about the media space? And you're on a much larger scale than I am. But it's a fact that with footy, you can almost, they're judging you on your football ability and what you did on the field, versus when you're in commentary, that actually is you. Yeah. And it's like, it's not who you are, it's not your person, but it's your opinions, and it is your probably most... It actually is your self. Yeah. So it's sort of, it does hurt a little bit more sometimes.
That's why coming from Colac.
Yeah.
My Colac slang, and the amount of feedback that I started with my grandma with the kicking and running, that kind of stuff, and I've worked hard on it where you do a bit of work in the off season.
That's you, and that's what people love. I think.
Yeah, but there's certain things that people enjoy the country larrikin side, but there's certain people out there that are highly educated who want people to pronounce their words correctly.
That's fair. The English is important. It's an important language. I can't even say what I'm saying now. I get reminded of that weekly that you can't just make up words, which is annoying.
Don't worry, we can try. And some of them catch on, but some of them don't always. But that's still a part of. I sort of look at the commentary. It's not something that comes natural to me, because if you listen to some of the boys with some of my speeches at halftime or before the game, they'll sit there and go, "Fuck, I had a strike rate of about 20%.
Yeah. So they're not Al Pacino.
No, I tried. Oh shit, I tried, and it made up a few of those words in there too. But there's the only what I did find out is the pressure that you put on yourself, whether it's football, whether it's commentating, or whether it's being a captain making a speech before the game, is no one fucking listens to you.
No one cares. They're all worried about their own shit.
No, but the only time they realise is when you fuck up.
Yeah.
when you so I remember I've given a few, and I remember there was times where Isaac Smith, for some reason, and he's a pain in the ass, Isaac. He's a funny guy, always smiling. He always used to stand about there. So if I'd say something, and then do you know when the words are coming out and you think, fuck, this is not going to come right.
Well, most days. And
then you've turned around and then you look and he's like, and I'm like, lost my train of thought, but I know that either during the game at halftime or sometime post-game that he's going to come up to me and say, what did you say?
Yeah.
And it's like, people only really pick up. You might say 150 things in a game of football, but it's the one that you stuff up or the 5 things that you stuff up. And my phone will only go off with mates going, can you please explain that again?
Yeah.
But that's the life we live in, that blokes good mates are in it to hang shit on you.
It's the best.
Yeah.
One, what I do want to just go back on quickly is when you said before about playing, coming for colac, all these things developing, was there a specific conversations with people, or did someone take you under their wing to teach you that professionalism piece? Was it one moment, or was there just little bits and pieces?
It was little bits. There's a lot of people, and I think throughout your career, there's a lot of people that help you. You can't. There's certain points you go, oh, he was a big influence. But I remember early on, there was Peter Swab in my first 3 years would sit down and he realised that I'd missed home and I was going back. So he'd sit down and go, okay, did you have beers this weekend? What did you eat? I was always honest with him. So he's probably, mate, you probably have less beers, don't have Macca's, don't have KFC. But I felt if you're honest to your coach, it doesn't quite work that way. But he sat down, was trying to help educate me and say, mate, this is probably not the best pathway. And then there was a massive change when Alistair Clarkson and Andrew Russell came into the football club, and Andrew Russell's big one was no soft drink. If you had a can of soft drink, your skin folds are high and you had bacon, he would rip you. If you had a can of soft drink, what are you having that for? It's no good for you. So those little kind of things. I remember the year that I hurt my knee in 2012, I thought I'm going to be stubborn with this. So I went, the first year was no lollies. And I dropped a couple of kilos, and the next year was no soft drinks. I dropped a couple of kilos, and then no chocolates. And I was playing at the lightest weight I have after just cutting out these little things that your body doesn't really need. But to answer your question, there were small people along the way that sort of gave little hints, and there's certain people would have given me advice early, but I wasn't mentally ready for it. I did want to not go and have beers with my mates because that's what made me happy at the time. But as I realised how important footy was and longevity of your career is by doing the right things 99% of the time, I realised that they started to be important. And that's probably why I got to the stage where I was able to play to 35, because I may have caught on a little bit later than everyone else. But through the times of after I hit my knee in 2012, I went full the other way as far as cutting out stuff from the diet. Would still have the beer with mates and a glass of red with mates, but it was working on my body, making sure. I saw a bloke, Mark McGrath, who I ended up seeing him 3 or 4 times a year just with body movement, body movement stuff, which after my knee I was favouring one side and started to have a calf issue. So then it started to work for me. So then I started to see him once a week, twice a week. And then by the time I left Hawthorn in 2017, I was seeing him 3-4 times a week.
So he's like, it's like calisthenic-y type movements, and it's quite weird.
So he tried to explain it. Do you know, and might sound weird for people at home, but do you know when you watch a baby and they sit back and they can crouch down and their movements is always, he goes, there's a lot of study done on body movements, and as we get older and we sit on the couch, you get that hunch, and then you lose the flexibility through your hips because you're you're sitting how you do. So a lot of stuff, I went to his house, he had no furniture. So he'd sit down there and do sit there and do certain positions to help his back and his spine and all that kind of stuff. And it does sound weird for people who haven't been a part of it. But I bought into it and it helped me. And even to the stage of when I moved to Brisbane, I'd fly him up early on. I'd do video times just to do certain things because I had a bad back from the years of football. But I'd do one session with him or do a video session with him. And all of a sudden, I was back training. I only missed a couple games per year when I was up in Brisbane because of the time and effort that I sort of spent into doing that, which you say the difference from when I was 17 to 25 or 22, 23, I would have looked at the stuff that he was doing because some of the stuff that he did was a bit random. But I would have looked at it and said, there's no way I'm doing that. But when you realise that your career could finish at 28, you do everything you possibly can. And I found something that worked for me. It doesn't work for everyone, but I found something that worked for me, which was helped me extend my career for another 7 years.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things. I think Juddy used him a little bit as well, which was...
That's who I think he was working at Carlton with Juddy, and then Andrew Russell got onto a few of the guys, and then I know there's Dylan Shield and a few of the guys
I think
now.
Tommy Mitchell uses him a little bit.
Tommy Mitchell's big on it,
Yep, good on him. Hey, there was early days in my career, I had a really good bit of advice from a coach and just a good friend called Darren Harris, who, unbelievable guy, and he asked me this question once and it stumped me, and it was like...
Don't stump me.
No. It's a compliment. It's long-winded. Just bear with me. And it was about like, he said, pick 3 blokes you'd go to war with. And, I just picked like 3 of my mates. And he's like, why? They're my friends. And he goes, no, like pick the guys that you'll go to war with. And the what he was basically trying to do was, in a weird way, was seeing the guys that you trust the most, the guys that you respect the most. And they're not necessarily your friends. They're the ones that you respect and the ones that would go to war with. They'd have your back. They'd push come to shove. And then he flipped it, saying like, do you think anyone would pick you? And I was like, oh, fuck, like, I knew straight away, like, no way. Like, no one would pick me. Like, where I'm at right now, no one would pick me. And I think, like, from then, like, my biggest thing has been, like, wanting to be a person that someone would pick to go to war with them. And for you, I don't know if that's, I'm sure it resonates. I know that it's something that you would model your game on, and I'm sure 100% of people that play with you, you'd be in that top 3 people that would want to go to war with. Yeah. Is that something you think about?
It's a question that we used to ask a lot in a different way. It was, as a leader, do you want to be liked or respected? And there's 2 big things, and that's where you said that, do you go the like stage of your mates and you see people do the right thing, do the wrong thing? Are you willing to have that tough conversation to make the standards lift as a football organisation? Or do you want to be, if you don't have those conversations, if you want to be liked, if you want to be respected, you have those tough conversations, you set the standard, you makes you accountable because you're making other people accountable. And I think that's where people would pick you. Early on in my career, no way, because maybe on the footy field I was trustworthy and knew what I was doing, but could you trust it away from the footy field that I was doing absolutely everything I possibly could to be a good leader, to be a professional athlete, which clearly I wasn't. But that's a good leadership question that we ask people. What do they want to be? And it probably refers back to what you were saying. How many people out of the mates would you have trust? But when push comes to shove, would they do the right thing, or can you trust them to do the right thing?
Who are some of your teammates that you look over the past? And it could be teammates, could be coaches, could be just friends and family. Like, who would you go to war with?
If you talk about football-wise, pardon me, you automatically go back and you look at the people who you put the behaviours in and around. And we used to always say that Ben Stratton was never the best player on our team. Like, so this is an era where we had Mitchell, Roughhead, Lewis, Rioli, Gibson, Franklin. The first person who was put up on the board as a player that you'd play with was Ben Stratton. Wow. Just because of you knew that no matter what happened, he would have your back. He would do anything he possibly can. Pretty much got us into a grand final, that goal-saving tackle against Paddy Dangerfield in 2012, because of how much his competitive streak was, but what he wanted to win, how much he wanted to win. And then the first person I saw when I got to the Brisbane Lions was Darcy Gardner, who had that same streak, as competitive as hell, would cross the line and be just this animal who'd do anything for you, but off the footy field would be a nice guy, would do anything for you there. So they're probably 2 blokes that they're not the names that you'd expect when you put up with some of the blokes that I've played with, but they're the first people when you talk about leadership, culture, trust, reliability. They're the 2 blokes that come to mind because of what they stood for as players and as people.
You can see, like, I've been lucky enough to meet Stratton a couple of times. I don't know him well at all, but you see the respect he's got from all his teammates. And I suppose with the success of the Flags, you know publicly now how good he is. But Gardner, it's funny you say that because I always watch him and I always think, fuck, I hate that guy. But like when you say that, and I said this I've had Braden Maynard on the show and one of my favourite players. But when I first saw Braden Maynard, I was like, I fucking hate this bloke. But it just makes you realise when you hate someone, you just love it. You're just either jealous of what they're doing or they make you have that feeling, you know?
Spot on. You don't like some people because of their smart asses or anything like that. But there's some blokes that just go out there and just love to compete, and they're the blokes
you want them on your team.
Yeah, and that's the trust issue. The who would you take to war question is because of how competitive they are and how much and what they would do for you.
Yeah, well, it's like the Toby piece, right? Like, you know, I would love to have seen you and Toby play together, and I think it would have been incredible the way that you could probably early in his career help mould him. Like he's at that stage now where he's so mature, but he's that guy that like he will. It's actually to his own detriment how much he backs his mates in.
Yeah.
Like I tell the story a bit, but there's this funny time when, when he allegedly eye gouged Lockie Neal.
Yep.
Allegedly. We still.
I was standing right there.
Yeah. Did you give any evidence there, mate? Or?
No, I didn't give any evidence. I did speak to him straight afterwards.
Yeah.
I was because the ball went up and I was playing on him.
Yeah.
At that time, I was playing on him, and I said, "What the fuck are you doing?" Yeah. I'm like, the week before you got warned, you got let off. I'm like, it was a final. I think it was the second final. I'm like, what are you fucking doing? Even if you didn't, don't put your hands anywhere near it. Nah, I'll be right. And I'm sitting there going, and I don't know if he got him. I can't remember that, but I remember the react sitting there just saying to him, like, mate, you fucking, what are you thinking? But that's where it goes to that. You go through a stage where he was a bit of a brat. I remember the time when he was on crutches and that's where we had the same manager at the time. And I sat there going, I could see a lot of him. Like he was a bit of a brat, a bit of a young kid who enjoyed a beer with his mates, but also wouldn't shirk an issue. I find that they're the same blokes that when they mature, they're the blokes that you want on your team.
There's a bit of Colac there.
Because you know that when push comes to shove, not fight-wise, but when you need someone to have your back, he'll be the first one there.
This is the point of that story, is the fact that, like, you know, obviously a big week for him, potentially missing out on the grand final at this stage, and I'm not even, you know, I'm training with the NEFL thirds. Definitely about to get delisted, and had just started the podcast, and we're sitting at his house, and honestly probably one of the biggest weeks of his life. You can imagine the anxiety. He was about to fly down to Melbourne to go to the tribunal. He's like, oh, better make the fucking most of it then. He goes, you know your podcast? Like, can we get that on a T-shirt? I was like, oh, fuck, you're flying down tomorrow. Like, I was like, yeah, potentially we can. Next day, he flies down. He's got his Giants polo on with Wayne Campbell, get off the plane. Know there's going to be a barrage of like 7 News Media and Channel 10, everyone there. And he whips off his polo in front of Wayne Campbell, and he's got the big Dyl Friends podcast on his T-shirt. And I was like, for that gesture, like, you know, I still talk about it all the time, like, as a mate, to do something for your friend when you're going through the worst time ever, but to like look at it like
free
that.
Promotion.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? Like, it's just a funny story that I just love.
I think that's where it goes back to the question, who would you take to war? I'm pretty sure he'd be one of the top in your list because what he'd do for you, and I think that shows a little bit. Yeah.
Before we finish up, mate, I can't go without saying, are you upset that we know the Scott Pendlebury resemblance of the basketball gets brought up a lot, but the Luke Hodge cricket, it didn't get brought up as much as I think you would like.
Nah.
How good were you? Who'd you play with? And out of all the past current AFL players around your era and ilk, who do you think was most dangerous? Who was the best and potentially could have done the most damage?
I played Dealing Shield with
and
Jimmy
what did you
Bartell.
actually? Sorry to keep going. What did you actually? Were you a batter, bowler? You a big fielder?
I was a big fielder. Yeah, I was a bloke who went from fine leg to fine leg. No, I was an erratic bowler. Not with my temperament. You wouldn't have pictured that.
Medium pace.
Tried to be erratic quick.
Okay.
I actually played. We're playing in a league up in Brisbane, last man standing, and I hit a bloke in the head the other day. Oh, wow. Scared the shit out of me because just the sound, the thud, and I didn't mean it. It was one of those ones where you try and bowl a Yorker and try too hard, and hence the erratic fast bowler. Scared the shit out of me. But the blokes I played with were Jimmy Bartell. Played Dowling shit with him. Played against Luke Ball.
And were those boys pretty good?
Yeah, Jimmy's a good bat. Luke Ball, just left-hander, just very
classy.
Very classy.
Yeah, you can see that.
You just see the way he moves, everything he does. He just had that technique. He was out of the blokes I played with or against down there, he's probably someone who definitely would have jumped out that could have pushed on to play cricket. Opted to go, clearly went football, but he was very good. And as far as my cricket went as far as that, it was an erratic fast bowler who occasionally got it where I wanted it to, and then was a slogger down the order. So had a lot of fun playing junior football, but there was never anything.
No, never.
Nah.
What about Murph and Dilly? I know those two think that they could have. Did you ever play against them?
No, they were about 3 years younger than me.
Young.
Yeah, so I was already in the footy in the AFL by the time that had come through, but still enjoy playing a game of cricket. Went down and played a couple years in 2005. That going back to play with the mates, I ended up getting in trouble because we made the grand final in 2005. I went down and played about 8 games. Didn't tell coaches, didn't tell anyone. And
when you were playing for the Lions?
No, when I was playing. No, 2005. I was playing for
what
Hawthorn.
The fuck?
Yeah, this was Clarko's first year's pre-season, and I justified it to myself. If you didn't miss any pre-season, it was the first year that I didn't miss anything. So I went through and did majority of the stuff that I had to do. And then I thought, as a reward, I'd sneak down and play games when I could. Then it was in the grand final. I made a few runs, and it was in the Colac Herald.
I was going to say, imagine these days with like Instagram and stuff.
Yeah, back then you could sort of do stuff like you'd go back and, but yeah, it was put in the paper, and then I got quizzed that next Monday going, how many games you play? I'm like, a couple. Said, you're playing in the grand final, so you must have qualified. I'm like, fuck, I didn't think of that.
That's unbelievable.
But nah, it was good, always good.
Mate, last one. Toughest opponents, favourite opponents to come up against. If you had to pick your top 3 over your career now.
Well, favourite opponent or teammate, it goes down the same bloke. Buddy, to play with a bloke who he's in his prime was just amazing to watch. Like we had prime Bud for a couple of years, and then prime.
What was
Bud,
that like?
It's hard to explain. To sit if you had the ball sitting inside forward 50, and you had Franklin, Rioli, Gunston, Roughhead, Luke Bruce, David Hart, everywhere you looked up, you thought this is a pretty handy forward line to kick to. But when you gave time and space to Cyril, what he could do pressure-wise, but also just break out of anything. But then when we played and had Bud high up the ground and space behind him, almost like the old Pagan's paddock with Bud, a couple of those goals that you remember was against Essendon, where he's turning around, run away from his opponent, looking back, just bouncing the ball, drilling it from 50. He was just an absolute freak. And you sort of look now, and the issue with people who play for a long period of time is you see what they do their last couple of years. I hope that people go back when Bud does retire and look at what he was able to do from like the year he kicked 100, I think it was 113 goals. That was in his 4th year.
I know. I was at that game.
It was the worst part was when Clarko put Ruffy back in front of Fev.
So that was bullshit. I should have asked Clarko. That was just because you could have got. He actually robbed everyone of running on again. That was the worst part.
And we're all sitting there because I remember on the bench at one stage in the last quarter, and I've turned around and said, "What the fuck are you doing? Like this?
You're up by like 100 points.
We're up by 100 points, and this is why he's a good coach. His mindset was, we got finals next week. We're preparing. If someone gets a run on, we've got a forward who's kicked. He needed 9, didn't he? Or needed 8? He'd had 7. He was preparing for what we're going to do next week. And we're all sitting there going, fuck next week. Yeah. This is a chance for 2 blokes to...
That's unbelievable.
I remember Fev actually saying, I remember because Gooey was kicking out. He's like, just kick it to me. Just kick it to me. He was out there trying to talk to the boys, and we're sitting there going, fuck, should we?
Do it.
It wasn't going to affect the game. And can you imagine Fev and how much his stories would have grown if he was able to do that? But it was an amazing thing. But going back to Bud, yeah, he was probably the best that I'd played with and against just because of what he was able to do.
Well, we had Ruffy on the show a while ago, and we're talking about the fact that you look at, people talk a lot about Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay at the moment, how good they are. At 21 years of age, Ruffy and I think they'd kick something like 150 goals together or something. Ruffy kicked 70
it was that year. It was
21.
about 180, I reckon.
180 together.
Ruffy, after the finals, I reckon Ruffy ticked over the 70. And
at 21 years of age, those two did that. And Charlie and Harry going incredible at the moment, but that's younger than what they are now and kicking probably 2 to 3 times more goals.
The game had changed a little bit, but they were just, between the two of them, as you said, when you didn't expect, so the year before they both had good years. Like Bud had kicked on maybe 60-odd the year before. But from to come out there in that year and to do what they did and build the pressure, and people started to go back and they were getting the best defenders without a doubt. We had a few others there, but it was the consistency that they had between the two of them. You sort of sit back and go, was a reason why we had a bit of success. We had some pretty good players down there.
Mate, I appreciate it, man. Incredible to get you in today. I could have chat for another 4 hours, and I really do appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. Incredible to get you in, and best of luck for everything ahead, mate. I know you're very got some good things coming.
Thank you, mate. And just remember, if you need me, I'm more than happy to come down a couple of days early, get away from the kids.
We will, and also, mate, we've got to look in a game of golf.
We do.
That's what we
I'm
need.
happy to come down every week if you want to go.
Well, we will definitely.
I'll ask the missus and get back to you.
And when I get up to Brisbane too, I want to go play. Where are you at?
Brisbane Golf Club.
You're at Royal?
Yeah. No, Brisbane Golf Club.
Golf Club
and Brookwater.
Is it Royal Brisbane as well?
Royal Queensland.
Royal Queensland.
Yeah, just under the bridge.
Let's do the tree peat.
Perfect.
Tree peat.
You're trying to make up those words, aren't you?
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate.